Welcome to the Beyond the Numbers podcast. Before we dive into this episode, we want to share an important disclaimer regarding the content of our discussions.
Welcome to the Beyond the Numbers podcast. This is a new podcast that we're hoping to link to some educational content on the Live Smart financial planning website. We're also going to try and illustrate a few client situations, and basically in doing so, we're hoping to, via Facebook and YouTube and some longer videos, try and illustrate how clients go through financial planning process, the costings involved, and then more importantly, what outcomes we see them get. Because I think if we illustrate that, it gives people a massive insight who've never done financial planning. What we're hoping to also do is on the back of that, get clients on a podcast at some point so they can give feedback on the outcomes from their perspective and how they felt about the process from start to finish. We may even link that to some examples of full client situations where they allow us to, which obviously it'll have data redacted, but it will show you a full financial planning case in various situations. We'll also try and give a bit of an insight into our back office system to try and take the mystery out of what happens beyond the meetings that obviously the client mainly sees. And that's it really. So I think hopefully for people listening, watching, it could be quite informative. So it gives a real insight into what you only see as a client of our business. So I think the first subject we want to really get into is life beyond retirement. Phil, what would you say your experience is when you start to look at how the cash flow modelling changes from pre to post retirement?
Well, it's really interesting, Julian. I think initially it's a huge. I think the biggest thing you see is a huge mentality shift that happens, and this often is guided by the advisor because clients go through their entire working life in that accumulation mindset where they're sort of saving for retirement, and then there's almost that line in the sand moment where they decide that they're going to stop working and they decide to retire, and then it's quite easy to look at the cash flow and say, well, you're going to be absolutely fine in terms of meeting your lifestyle. But the real value an advisor adds at that point, I would say, is sort of changing that mindset from being a saver into being a bit more of a spender and enjoying those active years of retirement.
I think for some people, they've probably saved for, in some cases, well, I mean, some of our clients have saved for 20 years, as my experience dealing with them for 20 years. And when you then look at the habits they create to save, and then when they have to switch the brain to spending, it's actually alien to them.
Yeah.
And I think actually mentally, which is obviously where sometimes we talk a lot, or a lot of people talk a lot about the human aspect of financial planning and advice. And it almost becomes more about the psychology and the human emotions involved in suddenly saying, well, look, you've now got to start spending your money. And you might see your money either start to go down a bit, and you've actually got to decide how much you spend based on what you've got, where before they'd probably earn a surplus amount of money.
Yeah.
So we're able to live, pay the bills, save, and potentially still go on holiday and things like that. There's a couple of things that always surprise me. It surprises me how easy it is for some people who are used to saving to then cut the cloth and just say, well, I know I've got all my outgoings tidied up and I can suddenly, I don't need as much. But then it also then starts to lean into that problem we always have as advisors, which is getting people sometimes to spend money and be comfortable doing it. And I don't know about you, but there's massive benefits in cash flow modeling when it comes to that, trying to show them sustainability to take the fear out of it and fear of spending money out.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the biggest areas. If you look across a client journey, I think it's one of the biggest areas where a financial advisor will add value to a client in the sense that I don't know if you've experienced the same, but you almost give clients a bit of permission through evidencing via a cash flow model that actually you can go on that cruise or that holiday and you can do the things that you've been saving for because of that mentality shift and changing that mindset from being completely frugal as you approach retirement in some cases to then being able to do the things that you want to do. I think cash flow modeling. I think it'd be really difficult. I don't know if you agree with this, but it'd be really difficult to do it without cash flow modeling because it's almost very theory based then, and you're trying to articulate that you absolutely can go and do what you want to do. Whereas clients, I think, once they see the model and they see that they're going to be fine and they won't run out of money, then it takes a lot of the fear out of what they want to do in retirement.
I think what you realise, and I had this situation last night of somebody that's really, like, really saved. They're probably topping £1 million in pension funds. And they're not mega wealthy people. A lot of people think people with £1 million plus in a pension fund are really wealthy. They're not necessarily mega wealthy people. All they've done is be really rigorous about, when the employers say match, they put matched amount in because then they got the gain of that. And then they've obviously earned enough income to have the surplus money, but they've just been really disciplined, not like wasting money and just sort of just being all around sensible then with how they've approached us and let us have like the freedom to give them, advice on when to take risk, when not to take risk, and then how to map out the portfolio. They've just give us a lot of trust. And obviously the outcome of that is the 10-year performance has been because of how obviously we passively manage money and multi-asset stuff. You're talking 150 to 200%
Yeah.
push. So it's like taking money now over 1 million as part of, in conjunction with what they've committed to save. And what even then, so obviously that's a big number for any person who's worked all their life. They know it's a biggish number. But even then, they're like, well, can I retire at 55? And how do you show someone that they can spend X, and then when is the money going to run out? I think that part there is the biggest fix. Once you give that job up, it might be 80 grand a year job. You don't really then, you're not in the mentality of you thinking, I'm not, can I go into the job market again and get a job like that back? Bearing in mind, in this case, the clients are counting down the days,
Yeah.
almost like they're in prison. Because
Mm.
it's actually about freedom. And the emotive side is the freedom.
Yeah.
And then the other emotive side is how much can I spend? When will I run out of money? Will I have enough? Because my company scheme only kicks in at age 60. I can't touch that. I've got 5 years of leaning on my private pension stuff. My state pension, 11 and a half, 12 grand kicks in age 68. And it's just that fear.
Well, that's why I think if you preparing for retirement isn't done in the year leading up to retirement, it's done a few years before because you almost need to sort of prime that mindset and sort of not almost coach clients through that journey because the experience we have of doing this day in day out, you see the same human behaviors time after time, don't you? A lot in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it just repeats. Like
So
the emotions repeat, but obviously they manifest in different ways.
So when you think about what a financial advisor does or a financial planner does, a lot of it is non-financial. I would argue a lot of the benefits of having financial advice, and there's a lot of data out there now to back this up, is in the non-financial stuff that you do. Because once you've created the financial plan and you've implemented the financial plan properly, and that's where lifestyle financial planning is so key because everything that you're doing is around the client's goals and what they want to do when they stop working. Because you get into that sort of what are you retiring to? And those sort of years leading up to that, you can really add value in a non-financial way, as well as all of the investment side things that you would do as standard.
I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this. Probably, obviously, I've probably got a larger sample to talk about, but you might have noticed it probably going back when you were doing the odd para planning case, and you can
Yeah.
compare it to others. I mean, one of the key things you notice is the difference between people that have been a client for 15 to 20 years versus the ones that rung us a year ago and said, look, I'm approaching 60. I need to get some kind of structure in place, or I want my tax-free cash is the common one.
Yeah.
And the problem is, I think they've then not had that 15 and 20 years like education, guidance, the gradual influence to then encourage them to save, knowing why they're saving. They understand tax relief a little bit more. They understand tax treatment. Understand like the growth element as to, once you've done a couple of 10-year segments of growth, you understand that the actual difference is massive
Yeah.
versus if you have to deal with it in the next year and it's like all the pressure's on that last year because you've only just decided to look at it and structure it. And how many times do we see clients with 5 or 6 pension pots that add up to 400 grand, 500 grand? They've had them for 30 years, never touched them, never looked at them. How many times do we see good performance?
Yeah, it's very rare.
And it's just, how frustrating is it for us?
Yeah.
It's you obviously don't want to pass your frustration on to that client because they're doing something now, they're acting now, but
Yeah.
you think, how can we get clients to speak to us sooner?
Yeah.
How?
Well, it's interesting. I spoke to someone yesterday in their 40s who thought it was too late and thought they'd started looking at this late. And I
Yeah,
sort
he's
of
young. He's young,
I couldn't
really.
hide my smile. I couldn't hide my smile because I was just thinking, you're early. And it's good because the earlier you engage with your finances and the earlier that you start looking at this, the bigger impact you can have. It's like with anything. It's like, for example, with fitness, the earlier you start looking after your body and the earlier you start training, the bigger impact it can have over a long period of time.
Yeah, yeah. Which incremental progress, isn't it then? Which is exactly the same as compounding and
It's time.
£50 a month saving and time in the market and all the other things that everyone goes on about when they're talking more technically. But yeah, it's incremental progress. And I think if we could somehow get people age, 40 is good, but if you could get them at 30, even just saving 50, £100 a month,
Yeah.
20, different level.
Yeah.
They could probably get to the stage where when they get to 40, 50, if they were disciplined and they did that all their life,
Yeah.
there'd be no pressure to save much at all.
Well, even getting someone in their 20s to engage with their workplace pension that everyone has, for example, if you just start seeing the mechanics and seeing the money going in and seeing the investment growth, you start to engage with it more, and then you start thinking differently, I think. I was exactly the same. When I first started engaging with my finances, everything changed for me because everything you start thinking about things in that context and you start making decisions differently and then you see the benefits of that years later. But that's when we think about it, Julian, that's one of the main reasons we're doing this series of podcasts. We want to sort of take the experiences of our clients that are in their 60s and who are retiring and have seen the benefits over this for a long period of time, and then offer that to people on social media, on the website, on various platforms who are maybe starting that journey. And that sort of transfer of wisdom is going to be so powerful, I think.
You see, it's a strange one. I've never really mentioned this as a story or even to a client, but it's just popped into my mind. When I was 18, within about 2 months of being 18, and then when you start to get where you get your first job, so your first 1 or 2, 3 months pay comes in, and I didn't earn lots of money. I probably earned 8 grand a year when I first, bear in mind we're talking a few years ago. And I can remember getting a financial advisor, an independent financial advisor in, seeing them at my mum and dad's house, and I think I did something like a £50 a month pension in, and it was done with Norwich Union. I paid into it for about a year and a half, and then I joined a company scheme, and then that's what threw all my planning off because when I joined the company scheme, obviously then I stopped paying into the personal pension when I probably should have. I don't think you could do both at the time. There's some regulatory difference at the time from memory, and I had a company scheme, and because it was then my first entrance into financial services, and I didn't stay employed, I went self-employed so young, and then didn't have enough, because I didn't do the 2 years in the company scheme. It accrued next to fresh air. I then didn't get back into the habit because then when you're self-employed young, well, you know this, true. You start off, you've got limited client base to suddenly think, well, I can't actually, if all your money goes into your business. And then and how many self-employed people will have a similar story?
Yeah.
And then I've been like that till now, age 48. It's just probably now I pay a bit more in my pension. But the reality is, when I look at it over the years, all my bit money is constantly applied back into my business.
Yeah.
I've never really had the means to then think, oh, In other words, do what some of the employed clients can do because they've got like a set income, set outgoings, and they've always then know what the surplus is.
Yeah.
How many self-employed people would follow a similar pattern?
Well, so many because it's intuitive, isn't it? If you think when you're going self-employed, your entire focus, your entire world is on it's building your business, and everything else comes secondary. So you often see that. You see self-employed people who are sort of 10 years in, and they're seeing the rewards of their work, and that's when they start thinking about financial planning.
Age 18, what made me do it? 'Cause my parents weren't of that mindset. At that stage, I had no eye on financial services. I was effectively a car salesman. So why why did I take a pension at age 18? What made me ring someone up and make contact? I
That's a good
honestly don't
question.
know. And then it's strange. Once I then obviously couldn't put into a pension, all I can remember doing, I can't remember numbers, but at one stage it was quite a lot, because I started earning quite a lot of money quite young and first got employed and I'd done all my exams and things 'cause it was the insurance world then. I can remember setting up unit trusts as they were then. I can't remember if I don't think there were ISAs and things. I can't remember what it was about. Or were they PEPs? I can't remember all that. But I can remember saving something like £300 per month across different funds. And I did that for probably 2 to 3 years, and then again got sidetracked with the self-employed. I just couldn't afford to sustain it. And then I probably lost my way for 10 years, 15 years. The point being, how many times does someone lose the way? And then we're there sometimes to sort of bring them back a little bit and say, oh, look, don't forget, you did that. It started off really well, and now it's habit creation, isn't it? And things.
Yeah.
But how much of our job is just that?
Well, I'm gonna probably reference this quite a few times because there's so much crossover between fitness and finance. But it's a bit like having a personal trainer, isn't it? In the sense that you can have a personal trainer to begin with, and they'll teach you the theory. But actually, the reason that people keep their personal trainers for a long period of time is because they become accountability partners, don't they? And it's like, for example, you say you train with someone at the
It,
gym.
it's accountability, massive.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally have trained with someone for getting on for 15 years. He turns up at 6 a.m. every morning, Monday to Thursday. The only time he'd let me down is if he's ill. And even then, we often train ill. And I know that's not advisable, but it's this habit thing again. When you think, right, I can't let someone down. So I am probably more accountable in my 4 times a week gym scenario than I am in most things in life, even my job, because I'm not that accountable in my job other than to clients when I book them in, or other than that, nobody really can tell me, or they don't really know what I'm doing in the gaps and all that.
Yeah.
They just assume I've got a lot on. And I mean, we all have little bits of accountability, don't we? Even if it's, you live with your parent. I can even live with my parents. I used to have to make sure I tidied up, or I did this, or didn't use all the milk. It's like accountability, isn't it, that makes you live a certain way?
You still have that now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Um,
But bringing it back to finance, it's sort of creating the financial plan up front, and there's an awful lot of discovery, an awful lot of trust in that. But the real value in financial planning is that ongoing relationship and making sure that you stick to the plan that we've agreed for you. Would you agree with that?
I would. I'd almost like, when we start to post some of these things to things like YouTube, I'd almost like some younger people to comment and say, and almost like feedback why they have done it already or why they haven't done it
Yeah.
based on what I was just saying about when I was 18. What made me do it? My parents did not have any influence over me at all. They were not that way inclined. They were sort of cash people. They worked in factories, so they had company pension schemes. They'd never have to think about a pension. What makes one person, like your 40-year-old guy, what made him make contact with us and decide age 40, I need to do some financial planning, really buy into it, be quite thorough in what he wanted?
Yeah.
Why didn't you do it at 30?
Yeah.
I know, 20s I get, because obviously you're doing university, you're getting straight on, you might be trying to get on the housing ladder. But yeah, the difference is exponential when we see our historic clients.
But when you think about when clients do make contact, how many times is it linked to an event? Because that's often, there's financial planning and seeking out financial advice is often linked to something, whether it's something that's happened to a friend or a relative, whether it's a bereavement, whether it's having kids, whether it's getting married. There's usually a trigger, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm just trying to think, start like going through the ages a little bit. So if you say 30 to 40, it could easily be children, tends to trigger. It might be a life assurance type question to start with, or mortgage linked, or I ought to think about starting a pension, or I'm moving jobs. That's a common one. So you tend to move jobs more, 30 to 40.
Yeah.
Moving jobs, I've got all these pensions, what are they? I don't understand them, that kind of thing. No one ever really comes to us about budgeting, do they? Can't think of many inquiries I've ever had on like budgeting yet. I think actually, I mean, I saw someone's bank statement probably 3 months ago now, and it had £350, £400 a month on average every time going out to Uber for Uber Eats. So
Right.
just takeaways.
Yeah.
So obviously you forget that some of these people, well, the young people that live in cities have got like big jobs, no time. You see
Yeah.
it commonly with lawyers and people like that, those kind of deadline-based jobs.
Yeah.
And they have to buy a lot of takeaway food because they've not got time to cook.
But how many times do you see, well, a client will come to us and they'll say, I want to talk to you about this. But actually, there's usually something else, isn't there? Or there's usually an awful lot more sort of to the picture than the specific query. Often the specific query is the thing that's brought them to us. But actually, when
It
you end up going a lot deeper,
it
there's a lot
starts
of things.
sometimes starts with a question, doesn't it? Or it starts with an event or something going on in the life. I mean, obviously, the one I've had a lot of last year, but it's probably and this is where things are changing as well. Like the dynamics of life change as time goes on. One of my really common ones now is 50 to 60 is divorce, and it triggers a big conversation around financial splits. They're often, you know, clients. So I know both of them to different levels.
Yeah.
You have to, as you know, you get that imbalance um, from the point of view of one person tends to be more financial than the other. And you see that really coming out in divorce because you get one person that's got less understanding than the other. And you realize the importance of trying to get two people in a financial planning meeting together and the value of it.
Yeah.
And it divorce is a massive, I mean, it's a massive one.
Well, 50% of marriages now end in divorce, don't they?
I think the difference is now, it used to be a thing for like maybe younger people, like I say younger people, like 25 to 40-ish. It's now become more of an issue for that 50 to 60, 50 to 65-year bracket. And obviously the implications are massive because then they're in a situation where it can completely shut down the retirement plans. Or depending on the value of the house, when you split a house in half, there's not enough to go out and buy another house without a mortgage.
The entire landscape changes, doesn't it?
Unbelievably, yeah. I think last year opened my eyes because obviously you deal with divorce, but I dealt probably in more detail because I did a little bit more mediation type thing to stop the lawyer costs running away and things like that.
Yeah.
And the outcome was immense, really, because you look at what it could have been, and it could have been an 80 grand legal bill on the
Yeah.
size of the estates. And instead, it was probably 5 to 10 because they just got the lawyer to do some of the main paperwork and the main bits.
Yeah.
But the amount of time it cost me, bear in mind, I did it as like a bit of an experiment and an experience thing. If I'd have logged time, I mean, you're talking days
Mm.
on and off, but days
Yeah.
of working out financial splits, capital gains on all the assets that they've got to sell, what we can move to such and such, we're going to have to mortgage, what mortgages need to be paid off, how the main property figures then have they got enough, where they're going to live when all this starts to happen. It the sort of trigger points are emotionally and financially more intense than any other trigger we see, I would say,
Yeah.
other than maybe death.
Yeah. And that's when you think about a financial planner, you wouldn't think that we would get involved in things like that, would you?
I don't think people realise the level of personal we get involved. I don't think they would expect, say, us to mediate or expect us to offer them counsel. If like somebody's died and or they're struggling emotionally with something. But I noticed it just because on our vouch for feedback, it's a lot of feedback that says there's a question that vouch for asks, would you talk about your personal problems with your advisor? And it's surprising how many people you think would who say no, and I'm probably talking 10-20%. But then on the flip side, 80% pretty much would say, yeah, I would tell them about and talk about my personal problems and things that aren't really relating to our job.
Yeah. And some of that must be down to the fact that some clients probably won't have that opportunity to speak with anyone about anything like this, will they?
Well, imagine in my case, you've dealt with a client for 20 years. Who else do they tell, uh, well, in their life, other than maybe the wife, even the kids, I won't say fit into this. Who would they tell about every aspect of every asset they've got? A few of the personal problems that crop up in the business, stroke the life. Then other problems, obviously, if there's a death situation, divorce situation, marriage situation, one of the kids is not doing very well or something else is going wrong. Well, they wouldn't necessarily tell one of the friends, would they?
No.
Because it means revealing things that they don't always want people around them to know. And then that's when you realize we're like a third party commercial relationship that's not actually very commercial. It's
No.
almost closer and more personal than a lot of the friends. So it's a really weird concoction,
But
and you're
also,
closer to them than the friends in
for
that
sure.
respect.
But also, it's a really interesting dynamic because we're just the way that we sit, we're positioned out just outside of their immediate circle, so we can offer a different perspective, can't we? We're not in the thick of their lives in that regard, like their friends or their family are. So we can offer an unclouded sort of opinion on things. And obviously that trust has been built up over so many years, which is why it's so important to choose your financial planner carefully, isn't it? Because it's a lifelong relationship.
I think that's when you realize, and we probably don't give clients credit for this, and you alluded to it, I think, yesterday. You sometimes see somebody and they say, oh, I'm going to see another financial planner and then make a decision. And at times that irks us, doesn't it? Because you think, well, I'd give everything to have the meeting. You do your best to show what we do.
Yeah.
And you know deep down by the way we do it, how well we do it, how ethically we do it, how we charge fair, and we're not conflicted, are we? We've not got biases to make us do bad things. Or
No.
I think you're almost offended that they've gone to see someone else. Yet you think, well, actually, how many people would you want to see to make sure, forget everything else about what we do and how we do it?
Yeah.
You've got to like the person.
Absolutely. And I almost take a slightly different view of it. I think I would rather someone choose me rather than go with me by default because it's so deeper, isn't it? And it's so much more rewarding.
I like it when people say to me, I've seen three people.
Yeah.
I don't like it if I don't get the client, but then if I don't get the client, I don't get the client. Someone else has appealed to
Well, that's it.
their needs more, which is
You,
fine.
you can't be all things to all people, and that's why it's human nature, isn't it? You'll connect better with other people than others, with some
You
people than
know,
other people.
the power in a client choosing you out of three people
Yeah.
is quite it sort of puts you in your relationship instantly goes to a different point compared to the client that didn't look round.
Yeah.
Just as well just deal with you because you're like, I can't really be bothered.
Yeah.
They're just more engaged. So,
Absolutely.
and as you know, engagement is our biggest. Almost for us, if someone's engaged, we can do more for them, more with them.
Yeah, the more engaged they are, the better the outcomes. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, and I think again, I don't know how we could get that point across to like prove the engagement bit, other than probably compare financial plans of short-term clients versus long-term clients. That'd be quite an interesting picture. But I suppose then it's quite random because it depends on what the client's earned and what
Yeah.
what the situation is.
I think the responses and the feedback we get from our existing client bank that are engaged, I think that tells the story because they've been engaged from the beginning and not always engaged from the beginning. Sometimes they've gone on a bit of a journey and got more engaged as the relationship and the trust has built up. But actually now, when they speak to us, the outcomes are so good, and that's the rewarding bit of this, isn't it?
I think the ironic thing is some of the clients I've got the best bond with are the ones that at some stage we've had some kind of minor ruck or words. I've only got like 2 to 3 examples of this in my head, but it's situations where they've had a reason to be like irritated by you for something you've done, the way you, something you've not done, something you might have forgot, or as simple as a birthday card like that. And it's amazing then how when your relationship obviously evolves longer term, how they then see different aspects of other things you do to them, what you did when they had a bit of a problem with
Yeah.
you, maybe something. And it's quite amazing then how much closer that relationship is because it's got some bumps in it.
Yeah, but our job really, our job is to tell clients to a certain degree what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, and that will cause discussions at times. But once you get past that, clients appreciate it because I don't think deep down clients don't want to be pandered to.
I don't think they want someone that just agrees with them and says yes to everything. Because let's face it, what does it really achieve if you're never challenged? I mean, we all need challenging. Sometimes we're not always on the right path, are we? Be it, it could be as simple as the way you talk to someone because you're stressed or minor stuff. But yeah, so I think we've got to probably have a think on future podcasts how we get some of these points illustrated or across to people to try and trigger them into action, maybe.
Well, I think we're going to talk in future episodes lots about various different topics that I think people will find useful, things about how to choose a financial planner, topics that will evolve from there. So I think we'll cover a lot of this.
Yeah. For now, shall we move on to cryptocurrency?
Hey, you've thrown me a curveball there. I wasn't expecting that.
So I've gone from human aspect financial planning to crypto. Now,
Okay.
obviously, chalk and cheese, but partly that's why I thought we'd cover it,
Okay.
because crypto is almost the exact opposite to financial planning in one sense. So I've seen quite a few examples recently where I've been doing financial planning on clients and they've got crypto, but they don't see the crypto as an investment. They just see the crypto as something that they've bought a few £1,000s off. It's done well, so then they've almost got hooked on playing with it, a bit like they do a fruit machine when they're having a pint in the pub.
Yeah,
No, I don't. I know I'm comparing it as if it's gambling because there's part of me that feels it is a little bit that way, given that it's not fundamentally based on, say, earnings or
I'd agree.
the value of a business climbing based on earnings or fundamental things like selling a product.
Well, first of all, it's not. As someone else, I can't remember who it was described it, articulated it perfectly. It's not an asset class. It's a currency to begin with,
Mm.
and its only value is someone paying more for it than you paid.
So I think the frightening thing about crypto, it's as an analytical person on certain things,
Yeah.
if I try and compute why I'd buy it, and then not only why I'd buy it, why I'd hold it, and then if I made money, why I'd keep buying more or hold it for longer to try and make more money as an asset, like any asset, it's very hard to think what is the end point of why will it always just keep going up? Because surely if it's just based on people trading it and that's the only thing, so it's demand based, it, my brain can't actually compute what it is as an asset.
Well, I think a lot of people who are big into it will sort of suggest that it's going to replace fiat currencies. And
Mm.
that's so they're taking a long-term view on that, and they could well be right. And I have no issue with a client saying, "I want to take a punt on cryptocurrency." Just don't bet the farm on it.
I mean, to be honest, I find it hard to criticize it as much as I find it hard to invest in myself because I'm almost like hovering in the middle of I don't really know what it is or what how do you predict the long term of something that's not based on anything?
Well, exactly. And this is why when we go back to financial planning, you can't base a financial plan on cryptocurrency, I don't think. And a lot of clients, a client will say, well, I want to go into crypto, and you can say, well, based on your financial plan, you don't need to. You don't need to take this risk. You don't need the sleepless nights of it dropping 50% in a day. But if you've got some money set aside, and if you want to go and play in it, you know,
I mean, let's face it, and this I suppose comes back to a little bit of why people don't invest in shares and then maybe use cash. If crypto was doing 5% per year, so a cash ISA or
yeah,
something like that currently, I don't think people would invest in it because then they
no, I
just see it
agree.
as, well, it's an asset that's doing all right, but I can get that from cash. I think
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a thrill seek.
yeah.
And particularly and I think also then they think it's always going to carry on going up because it's gone up, which obviously we've seen a little bit with shares over the last 10 years as well, to be fair. I just don't think people would invest in it if it wasn't for the returns being volatile.
Yeah.
Yet, from our point of view, when you think about the logic of it, that almost puts us off because to actually achieve the client's end game in a financial plan,
Yeah,
it's an asset that's almost no use to us.
absolutely. Anything that can drop 50% overnight, you can't build a financial plan on.
And I think that's when it's, for me, a confusing asset.
Yeah.
I don't think we've sorted that out, have we?
No, don't think so.
So that was a useless segment where basically we've got no conclusion.
We just gave our thoughts on crypto, but
It might have made it clearer for someone else in the head.
agreed that we wouldn't probably include it in what we do.
So should we move on swiftly to something a bit less thrilling?
Yes, what have you got for us next?
Budgeting.
Okay.
So this is back to my Uber point a little bit. So I mean, obviously we've all seen it, and it's been. I see a lot of LinkedIn posts from people I know about how much people spend on takeaways, Starbucks, various things that you can spend money on, and it's a habitual thing, or it can be. But it actually then shoots you in the foot for saving money, or you get the same client saying, "Oh, I can't afford to invest pounds a month."
Yeah.
How do we tackle budgeting without feeling like we're telling someone what to do?
I think I think most people don't know what they spend.
I think there's a bit of that, yeah. So it's back to structure a little bit, isn't it?
So I think if a client's engaged and willing to go through a budgeting exercise where you can point out and you can show them exactly what they spend without comment, and a lot of clients will come to the conclusion themselves, and they won't have seen those numbers over a month or over 12 months.
I think we need to get some slides that show simple things replaced with saving and investing.
Yeah,
So, for example, if we could do, right, this is how much you'll spend with Uber over 10 years if you carry on buying takeaways from age 20 to 30,
yeah,
because that's the pattern I see. And then it does seem to tail off, say, when people have children or they start to think more about their own budget and the
yeah,
limitations of it. It's when they've got surplus money,
yeah,
disposable income. And I think if we could then do a comparison where we could show that going into a medium risk investment for 10 years
yeah,
with compounding effect in it and everything,
yeah,
I think if we put two slides up on within this podcast,
yeah.
I just think that pretty much covers all the points we need to cover in that.
Absolutely. The visuals will show exactly what we mean. And there's so many things, it's not just Uber Eats, there's so many things that I would put in. So from what I drive that I would put car finance in there. I would
Yeah.
put,
Well,
I'd
lease
say
costs, lease costs tempt you, don't they, to spend 450, £500 a month.
yeah. And we're not saying that it's wrong and you shouldn't do it, but it's just a thought experiment. It's just if you didn't do that, what could you do instead? And it's again not saying one way's better than the other, one way's right, one way's wrong, but we just show you without comment the difference between the two scenarios, and then based on your goals and what you want to do over the next 10 years, you can come to your own conclusion as to where you want to be.
I mean, it sums it up, doesn't it? Like when you look at the car thing, and if this is a massive example of something desirable looking that you can actually afford, most people could afford,
Yeah.
I saw a lease advert for a Range Rover, base model Range Rover, but they've got everything anyway to some degree.
Yeah.
I think it was something like 550 per month. And you think, you know what, that's affordable for a Range Rover.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's that, 75 grand car maybe for 550 per month, then give it back. So you can see why people especially someone who's a bit more impulsive, you can see why they do it. And then they
Yeah.
suddenly, you look at that cost over, say, 3 years, and then you take off what the benefit would have been if they'd have just had a 200, £300 per month car and then save £200, £300 a month.
Yeah.
It's just, we almost need to get a lease deal and compare it to, right, this is if you invest that equivalent money instead of buying a Range Rover.
Yeah.
But then, understandably, you are always going to then get like some people say, well, to be honest, I'd rather have the Range Rover.
Yeah. But that's fine. But just showing you what you could have instead. It's just
This
education.
is
This is an alternative way of doing it.
this is a bit of a tangent because it's not really related to budgeting as such. But how many times I see clients and just people generally who then aren't clients or don't become clients with cash, and they think a cash ISA is an investment.
Hmm.
What tax at 5% is a cash ISA saving a 20% taxpayer?
Well, quite.
I mean, what is it?
Well, no, and also you have the personal savings allowance, which means you can hold if you want to hold cash, you can hold cash outside of an ISA without paying any tax on it for most working people.
But when you think about it, a cash ISA makes absolutely zero sense.
Well, it is the most tax efficient way to lose money.
It makes no sense because obviously, I mean, I think I saw one the other day, it was 4%, 4.5%, something like that.
Yeah,
Inflation's 3%.
yeah,
So it's making 1.5% real growth, which is like that's sort of irrelevant because even if you look at inflation at 3%, it's not an accurate reflection of the cost of living, is it? Which is
correct.
probably going to be more than that
Yeah,
when you start bringing other things in that aren't included in that 3% inflation calculation.
yeah.
But what irks me a bit is that when you look at the interest, the tax saving on the interest, you've got next to no tax on interest in any account
No,
because they don't return anything.
no.
So it's like you're not saving any tax because there's no return to save tax on. You're not gaining anything. I know there is a saving, but you're talking like 10, £20 here and there.
But also we can show that's another powerful illustrator is you can show over 10, 15 years the difference between holding your money in cash and versus a medium risk portfolio.
I think it's misunderstood as well because the amount of people that say to me, well, I just need something that I've got access to. Well, if somebody's got stocks and shares ISA and I sent you an email and said, Phil, can you sort me out a withdrawal
Yeah,
on this stocks and shares ISA? How long would it take me to get my money back in my bank account?
few days.
7 days? Yeah, it's not. I don't honestly think it. By the time what cash ISAs are like. Oh, actually, you've got to come into the bank to draw it out, or
Yeah.
it's not like an online thing generally, is it? Often
No,
you
you
get
do a letter via carrier pigeon.
so you look at it, you think it's basically the same levels of access, really. And then the amount of people that say to me, "Well, I can't let that go because I'm waiting. I've got to keep it in a year to get my 4%." You're like, by the time you've kept it in another 6 months, you've lost more
Yeah,
than you're gaining because it's not returning anything. So inflation goes up over 6 months. Well, you've got at least another 3% over 6 months, haven't you?
yeah.
Even if you say 1.5% if you split the year in half. It just, I would say, if out of every conversation I have, it's the one I have a lot, and it really, really irritates me because I can't get through to people how cash does not make sense.
I mean, it has its place for super short term because you wouldn't invest for less than a few years because of the potential volatility. But
But how many clients have we got? And I know we've got them where they've had money in cash ISAs for 5 to 10 years
yeah,
because they've been told that they've got to have an emergency pot. But then you look at the size of the emergency pot and they've like got 50, 100 grand.
yeah, yeah.
Like, who needs 50 to 100 grand in an emergency quicker than a week or a week and a half?
I think there's something to having a few £1,000s in premium bonds.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's if I was going to do it, I get why people are going to do it. Yeah, I mean, what's the return? About 4% again, but it's
Yeah.
tax free. It's no aggro. You can deal with it online.
It's a bit of a for money that you might need to that you don't want to have any investment risk on, and that you might need to access if the boiler goes or something. Gives you that little bit of a free lottery, doesn't it? I think, which
The,
is
tr
quite nice for people.
the trouble is, then people end up putting like 50 grand in,
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a
and,
different matter altogether. I
and then
agree
you're
with
like,
that.
right, just explain to me why you like that investment so much. If I tried to get you to do an investment that retain you 3.5% based on prize funds, but it's that chance of it's a bit like the Bitcoin type current crypto thing.
Yeah,
It's the buzz of having the potential to win £1 million.
but I think people don't sort of people who know about stocks and shares ISA and the value of them and premium bonds wouldn't then have £50,000 in premium bonds. I don't think. I think a lot of it is a lot of it is that not knowing the alternative and not knowing the value of long-term investments. I think I have a lot of sympathy with people who because you don't know what you don't know.
No, yeah, I think there's a lot of that goes on, isn't there, in general.
But
Um,
people do hold too much cash as a general rule.
I think we've probably gone on long enough, Phil.
I think so.
So I think we'll cut it there and I'll press
See you on the
pause.
next one.